Hey peers, it's Mr. Wood, and let's look at 4.1, Part 1, our second vocab section. We're on Part 2 where it says the spread, reform, and syncretism in religion. And here's a perfect place to start. This is the Fatih Mosque, Fatih. I misspelled it on the packet, I put faith. It's F-A-T-I-H, Mosque, in Istanbul, Turkey. Well, let's start with Istanbul. Now, it was called Constantinople when it was part of the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. What happens is these people called the Ottoman Turks, who we'll get to in a minute, take over the city, and it changes to Istanbul with their Ottoman Empire. And they take the city in 1453. Now, that's all historically significant because this mosque here, the Fatih Mosque, takes a lot of styles of architecture from the Byzantine Empire and also mixes them with Islam, which the Ottomans were Muslims. Islam is spreading still in the early modern era from 1450 to 1750. The Ottomans become the major power in Islam. They build the Fatih Mosque, which is a mosque which uses Byzantine styles, shows a lot of cultural diffusion, syncretism of architectural styles from Roman, Byzantine Christianity, and Ottoman Turk Islam. And that is the Fatih Mosque in Istanbul. Sikhism, or Sikhism, as I've heard pronounced Sikhism before, is a new religion that starts in the early modern era. It takes different elements from both Hinduism and Islam. A lot of Hinduism and Islam ideas are mixed, and there are these gurus. These gurus are basically like teachers who are like these great teachers who start the religion. Sikhism is known for their believers who wear turbans. If you see someone wearing a turban like this, many people mistake them for being Muslims, but they're actually Sikhs. It is a monotheistic religion, meaning that it believes in one God. Their holy site is in the Punjab region in India. And again, it is a diffusion or a mix of many ideas that came from Islam and Hinduism with a belief in one God that exists in India. There are still 20 million Sikhs who are in the world today in many different parts. And they have faced persecution for their religious beliefs as well. So these are Sikhs who are very significant because they show cultural diffusion, mending and mixing of cultures in India, which was happening in the early modern era. The Ottoman Empire is a major land empire that exists in the early modern period. The Ottoman Empire is an Islamic empire. They are started by people who are from Central Asia, Turkish people who come into the area of Anatolia, known as Turkey today. And as we can see here, beginning around like 1300 and on, begin spreading their empire further and further. A big date for the Ottomans is 1453, when they take the city of Constantinople, and it becomes Istanbul. That is a major time in the Ottoman Empire. They're also very significant and important because the Caliph, the Islamic Caliphate, basically transfers to the Ottoman Empire, who keep this Caliphate going all the way until the 1900s. So the Ottoman Empire, here we see here on the map, their greatest extent in 683, as they were one of the major land empires that existed in the early modern era. Another major thing to know about the Ottoman Empire is that they were Sunni Muslims, and they kept the tradition of the Caliphate going by rank and ability to do the job, not by relation to the Prophet Muhammad. And this made them have conflict with the next empire that we'll talk about, the Safavid Empire. Here we see a map of the Safavid Empire, which is located right here. Now these were Shia Muslims, which means they were distinctly different than the Ottomans here, and this became a rivalry in Islam, kind of similar to the Protestant Catholic rivalry. A little bit similar to that happened within Christianity. The Safavid Empire was Shia, and they had conflicts and they had battles with the Ottoman Empire, and they kind of were, for the Ottoman empires, they kept them from becoming more powerful because they had to fight the Safavid, and potentially they even stopped the Ottoman Empire from invading and potentially even taking over Europe. They were also known for their gunpowder or cannons. The Ottomans, the Safavid, and Mughals, who we see here, where all three of them were part of what would be called the gunpowder empires, and are very strong and significant in this era. The Battle of Calderon. The Battle of Calderon was a battle between the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire. Now here we see on this side, we see the Ottoman Empire, and to their great advantage was their firepower, or their cannons, which helped them win the battle. Now, also remember that they are Sunni Muslims. So the Ottomans are Sunni Muslims. They're able to defeat the Safavid Empire, and they are Shia Muslims. What this will also do is any advance of Shia Islam. And if we look at the map here, what happens is it basically stops the advance of Shia Islam, and the Shia Islam remains a minority sect, much smaller than Sunni Muslims in the future, and that is very significant. So it's basically gunpowder. The cannons allow the Ottomans to win. After this, the Safavid Empire gets cannons as well, and there will be more battles between these two empires in the future. But a very significant battle because it puts the Ottoman Turks up on top, and it puts Sunni Islam as having more power than Shia Islam, which does affect Islam up until the present day. Sufi Islam is seen as being more of a mystical Islam. Sometimes it involves a lot of dancing, a lot of chants and songs that kind of get you into this almost a trance sensation where you can have an experience with God. So this was also very important because Sufism shows a lot of cultural diffusion, which doesn't always happen in other sects of Islam. For example, in Turkey, Sufi Islam mixes a lot of other elements that are outside of Islam, and in India in particular, you see a lot of elements of Hinduism, which come into Sufi Islam as well. So it becomes kind of like an era of cultural diffusion, an area of mixing of Islam between Islam and Hinduism, my bad. So kind of we see there's cultural diffusion that happens. So Sufism, again, is another example of syncretism that happens. We see it happen in India, and it also happens in Turkey as well. Sunni Ali. Actually, Sunni Ali, probably better pronunciation. Sunni Ali. Sunni Ali was the first emperor of the Songhai dynasty. The Songhai dynasty, which is your next word on your packet. He was the emperor of the Songhai dynasty. He was able, in West Africa, he was able to defeat the existing Mali dynasty, which was kind of coming down at its end, and was able to establish a new dynasty in Africa. He was known as being a ruthless military leader, potentially a navy genius, as he sent his ships on the Niger River to defeat Mali. He's also known as saying he was a Muslim, but more just kind of saying it in name, as he more followed the traditional African beliefs than Islam. So many other Muslims did not like him and actually rose up against him when he was leading. It's why his son was never able to really take power. He was a Muslim who practiced more traditional African beliefs, more just said he was a Muslim in name than actually being a real Muslim. Ruthless leader, but definitely got the Songhai Empire going and made it a major power in this time in West Africa, and continued the trans-Saharan trade which existed at this time. There we see the Songhai Empire. It's known as being the third of the great West African empires, and it continued into the early modern era. The Songhai Empire, first there was the Ghana Empire in West Africa, which started the trans-Saharan gold for salt trade. Then you had Mali after that, which kind of peaked with Islamic learning. Mansa Musa, that was Mali. Then we had Sunni Ali was able to start the Songhai Empire, which actually peaked during the time of the person after Sunni Ali, Askia Muhammad. Askia Muhammad was able to take kind of like the military state that Sunni Ali built, and he was able to reform the laws. He was able to bring education back into West Africa, more reading, more trading. He followed more of a true form of Islam, although he still definitely mixed it with West African beliefs and a syncretism that continued, from the Ghana, Mali, into the Songhai Empire. And important for building at that time one of the great empires in the world, one of the great land empires in the world that existed in West Africa, especially with trade continuing on the trans-Saharan trade route. Here we see the Protestant Reformation, and it has to begin with talking about Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a Catholic monk who was, never could find himself like being forgiven for God, was constantly asking for forgiveness. So he went to Rome, saw huge amounts of corruption that were going on there, was really upset with the sale of indulgences, which were in the most basic sense asking people to pay money to get out of reconciliation. So basically what someone would do is they would confess their sins, and then they could pay their money, and their reconciliation would be gone. This is, instead of doing something like making a pilgrimage or doing something else, you would pay money. And what really got bad with indulgences was these indulgences, people would sell them, and they would say it was a way to get out of purgatory. Purgatory, in the traditional Catholic belief of this time, was a place between heaven and hell where your sins would be burned out of you, and you would have to wait there before you could go to heaven. And they said you could pay money and get yourself out of purgatory. They also were people who were selling indulgences who, unfortunately, it was horrible. They were saying that what you could do is you could buy this indulgence and get your dead mother or dead relative out of purgatory and get them to heaven faster. This money was used to build St. Peter's in Rome, where the Vatican is today. Pretty shady. So Martin Luther was against this. So what he did was, he took his 95 Theses, that's these right here, these 95 Theses, which were his 95 complaints, and nailed it to the door of a church in Germany, in Wittenberg. He was excommunicated, kicked out of the church, and this basically began the Protestant Reformation. Because what he decided to do then was to say that, you know what, I'm going to start my own church, which will go only by Scripture, only by the Bible, not have the Pope, not have the priest, and it'll be called the Protestant Church. And the Protestant Reformation, what happens is parts of Europe start joining Luther, and we see Europe becomes divided between Protestants, people who follow more of what Luther says and are not Catholic anymore, and the Catholic Church. So we see a divide that happens. This is the Protestant Reformation. It is the division between having one Christian church in Western Europe, and now we have two, which are the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. And that happened at this time in the early modern era, and we still see evidence of it today. Historical significance. Walk down a street and you can see all different kinds of churches. You can see Catholic churches, and you can see many different kinds of Protestant churches: Lutheran, Episcopal, Methodist, etc. That was a pretty big one. So let's get to our next term, Protestant. So what is a Protestant? A Protestant is a Christian, basically, who is not Catholic, who is not Orthodox. Orthodox is an Eastern sect of a religion. A Protestant is someone who's not Catholic, is not Orthodox. They could be someone like Lutheran, Methodist, Calvin. Why do we call them Protestant? If we look at the word Protestant, you see the word protest in there. They are people who were protesting and wanted to reform the church, and they wanted to make it a better church. So these are where Protestants came from. There was a lot of war that happened in this Reformation in Europe, a lot of division, a lot of fighting as people took sides. It got pretty bloody, and that is how the church divided, and why we have a Catholic Church today and many different Protestant churches in America and many other places all over the world. There were some long definitions here, and I only get 15 minutes of each of these videos. I don't know if you noticed that. So what we're going to do is pause here, and there's going to be another video linked. So keep up the great work, everybody, and let's go on to the next one.